Hello everyone, good evening, welcome along. You are watching Space Dave Live episode number 13. It's awesome to have you with us tonight. With us in our studio audience, we have some of these familiar faces, some of the stalwarts of our studio audience. So thank you everyone for coming along. You are champions. And over in the background there, we have got Jess looking after social media, the competition and all the other bits and pieces there. So let's have a look at our program tonight. Let's get stuck straight into it. So tonight, after the introduction and other bits and pieces, we're going to go over the news headlines, including the Artemis program, which is the program to get back to the moon. Some big news from the International Space Station, some updates from planetary rovers, and a few other bits and pieces to talk about there. A couple of things to look at in the night sky, you can see what we've got there. And then we are going to try and tackle a bunch more of your questions and discussion topics and that kind of thing. So hopefully we'll have plenty of time to do all of that stuff tonight. So first of all, the housekeeping and whatnot there. So let's start off with a quick mention, of course, of our Patreon page, which is how you help support the show and keep us up and running. So thank you everyone who is helping out with this. You just go here and you sign up and pledge a little bit of money each month, and you get to have a nice warm fuzzy feeling knowing that you're keeping the show going. And that's kind of about it, really. You do get a few other rewards there, but really honestly you are doing it to help us out, and we really do appreciate that, of course. So we've got a few people or a couple of people to thank tonight, our new patrons. Lance Millam, who is, I believe, back on board with us tonight, back off night shift. Good on you, Lance. Thanks for your support. And Antonius Peters, who is helping us out from Auckland. So thank you very much. We really do appreciate your support. It helps keep the show up and running. Yeah, good on you. So the crowd loves it. Yeah, big round of applause. Good stuff. So thank you, everyone, for all your support. We really do appreciate that. So let's see, other housekeeping stuff tonight. Look, we don't actually really have a lot of housekeeping stuff to talk about, which is good. I will, excuse me, just quickly mention that we, as I keep mentioning actually, it's our really, really busy time here at the Space Centre. Absolutely frantic. This was just earlier today. We had Fairfield Intermediate over here. They sent us their whole school, over 400 kids, not all in one day, but we've had them over a few days, and that's been a lot of fun. What it does mean is that we're just not having much time for anything else here, and I wanted to mention that I am well aware that I was going to say I'm struggling to keep up with my emails and messages. I'm actually failing to keep up with my emails and messages, so I'm struggling, but it's not working. So I'm aware that a few of you are contacting me, and I'm sorry for those ones that haven't been responded to. A couple of things perhaps. Questions. If you've got questions for me that would be appropriate for the show, it would be helpful if you can actually ask them on the show as part of the live chat, so everyone gets to participate, and I'm not repeating myself to lots of different people. That kind of is the purpose of the show. So as much as I love getting your emails and questions via private message and all sorts of stuff, if you can do them on the show, that would be better. If you're sending me an email, if you could do me a solid, and before you send your email, collect all your thoughts and questions into one email and send that to me, that would also help. Because I'm finding that I'm getting a whole lot of, oh, and by the way, and I just thought of one more thing, and that it doesn't help my inbox, which is already struggling under the load. So if you could help out with those couple of things, that would be awesome, and I will do my best to try and catch up. But anyway, I think that's about enough of that. We want to get stuck into talking about some space news. So if you didn't catch what happened last week, we had a bit of a chat about copyright issues that we're having here. It's a long story, but the short version is that we are not really able to show a lot of the content that we have been doing, in particular a lot of the videos, at least for the time being. I think we will be able to get back to it, and we'll just edge back into it slowly. But for now, what we're doing is we are really just concentrating on showing you some websites and providing the links in the show notes. Now, what I think about that, the show notes, if you look in the description, both on Facebook and YouTube, wherever you're watching from, if you look in the description, you should see the links to the show notes. Go there, and on that page there's links to all of the web pages that I'm going to show you and other things that we're going to be talking about, so you can access it from there. Just let me know if you have any problems with that. Right, before we actually get onto it, let's just have a quick look in the chat. Mike, has everyone else got sound? I'm guessing everyone has got sound. I'm picking we would have more complaints by now. Mike, is there a problem with your sound? Is there? Just let me know what's happening there. Hi everyone else. Anyway, so Yep, we'll keep an eye on the chat tonight. I've got a couple of plans for the chat, but we might talk about that a little bit later. Thanks for the visit to TAPS this week. Yes, I went to Te Awamutu Primary School along with Floyd, who's not with us here tonight. Your grandson loved the talk and is pestering me to take him to the Space Centre. Well, that worked. Nice. That's a good result. Janet, you have sound. Thanks very much for that, Janet. What was it, Derek? Sorry. What Derek was referring to there is my son Floyd and I went to Te Awamutu Primary School a few days ago, and we were the guests of honour, the guest speakers at their fathers and sons breakfast. Now, you've made it as a public speaker when you get invited to Te Awamutu Primary School's fathers and sons breakfast. It's a really cool thing to do, actually. It's a neat thing, so we enjoyed coming along there. Thank you for that. Right, anyway, we need to get on with the news, don't we? We've got a few things to talk about tonight. Now, first up, the Starlink satellite thing that we've been going on quite a bit about. We're not going to dwell on that tonight, but so this is SpaceX's constellation of satellites that they've put into orbit for internet access, and there's been a few complaints as well as lots of admiration. A lot of people thinking that it looks really cool, and it does. But there's also an issue of how it's affecting the night sky and astronomers. So I said that this argument wasn't going to go away anytime soon, and the International Astronomical Union, which is the authority for Western astronomy, they have come out with a statement there. Link in the show notes, of course. You can go and read what they've got to say about it. But they are very concerned, and they've made a few salient points there. Including the big one that I think a lot of people are missing there. So we're not clear about exactly how visible these things are going to be in their final orbit and when we've got them all up there. But I've just remembered something, the competition, haven't I? Thank you, guys. I've seen a bit of activity out there. Thank you for keeping an eye on me. Anyway, so what the IAU was pointing out there is that even if you can't see these things, they are disrupting astronomy. And I think that's really important that we talk about that. But anyway, we have talked about it enough, but the link is there if you want to go and see what the International Astronomical Union has got to say about it. Now, the competition. I forgot all about the competition, which is absolutely no good because we definitely need to start off with the competition, don't we? Now, this week's competition was suggested last week by Jaden Litolf. So thank you, Jaden. It's very similar to the one that we had last week, but I thought, why not? We'll go with Jaden's suggestion, and that is, what is your favourite astronomical body? Last week, it was, what was your favourite planet? But a few of you slipped in a couple of things that weren't really planets, were they? Come on. But that's okay, we kind of let it slide. But let's talk about this one because there's lots of astronomical things out there. In fact, I should have maybe worded it slightly differently. This will do though, but just anything out there in space. A celestial object actually might have been a better way of putting it. So it could be a planet, a moon, an asteroid, a comet, a nebula, a galaxy, a quasar, whatever. Just put whatever you think is your favourite celestial object or astronomical body. And remember, this is important. Remember to start it off with the word comp, and then the colon, and then put it in. That means that when Jess is out there going through and trying to get all of the competition entries together, she can see which ones are the competition entries easily. So there you go, that is the competition. Get stuck into that. Righto, let's just have a quick look on our chat and make sure everything's going all good. Thanks, Mike, for that. Your internet crashed, that's no good. Andy from Christchurch, hi. I'm not going to go through all of your names, but hello, everybody. Kate, you've moved to Pahiatua, but I can still hear you, even all the way in Pahiatua. It's been a long time since I've been there. Lovely little place. Anyway, where were we? We're talking about some news. Okay, so let's first of all, next, talk about the Artemis program. So this is NASA's program to get back to the moon, right? So to get people back to the moon at least. So this is the big push with the Trump administration. This is, if you like, this generation's Apollo missions. We're going to be getting people back to the moon. So they're talking about it a lot. It's been a big thing. Actually, let's just go a quick historical recap here. If we go back to near the turn of this century, President George W. Bush, when he came in, he announced a new plan to get people back to the moon, and that started the Constellation program with NASA, and that kind of floundered along throughout his presidency. But didn't really quite nail it, didn't really get close enough. When President Obama came in, he said, no, we don't need to go back to the moon. We've already done that. We should focus on going to Mars instead. So, yeah, that was, It was an interesting decision. To be perfectly honest, I think he was just kicking it too far into the future to worry about, so it was someone else's problem. But anyway, so that was the focus through Obama's presidency, at least for human spaceflight for NASA, was worrying about getting to Mars in the more distant future. Then when President Trump came in, he said, no, we need to go back to the moon. So had a big announcement and everything, and now we are focused on getting back to the moon, and we need to do it really, really quickly. We've been covering that on the show a lot, haven't we, over the last few months actually now. We've been talking a lot about this whole urgency, this new sense of direction, and everything's all focused on getting back to the moon. NASA's now starting to make lots of compromises to make it all happen, and apparently it's got to be done by the year 2024, which everyone has noticed would be Donald Trump's last year as a president if he gets re-elected. So there's no other reason we can think of for the year 2024 for that arbitrary deadline, but it's been the big focus, the main focus of Trump's space policy, I guess apart from Space Force, is to get NASA back to the moon. So that's what we are looking here, the Artemis program. And so this story here is just about the flight management team here doing some simulation exercises. So that's all they're doing really. They're starting to simulate a few different mission parameters and stuff going on there. So not much of a story in itself, but we do have to talk about the other thing that happened, don't we? So let's see, let's just go over here. So this is a tweet from Donald Trump from less than 1 month ago, back in May. Under my administration, we are restoring NASA to greatness, and we are going back to the moon, then Mars, etc. So I can't stress this enough. This has been Donald Trump's directive to go to the moon, not anything else. We're just doing that. So you can imagine what it must have been like for NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine when one day he's at work just doing his job. And look, actually, let's sidetrack on that for a sec again. Jim Bridenstine, the NASA Administrator, is doing a good job, I think. I wasn't that fussed on him, was I, when he got appointed? But actually, he has impressed me. He's juggling a lot of stuff. He's got a lot on his plate. He's got this real thing from the president to get back to the moon, and he's actually kind of making it happen, really. Whether it'll happen or not, I don't know, but he is actually doing a pretty blooming good job of the whole thing. So he must be feeling pretty happy with himself, or he would have been thinking, yep, I'm doing the president's good work, it's all happening, and then he sees this tweet. For all of the money we are spending, NASA should not be talking about going to the moon. We did that 50 years ago. They should be focused on the much bigger things we are doing, including Mars, of which the moon is part, defense and science.
Oh my goodness.
Wait a minute. I think there's a couple of issues in there, Mr. President. Look, I mean, where do you start with this one? I don't know. I guess the obvious one that jumps out, doesn't it? Including Mars, of which the moon is part. Well, you've probably seen a lot of the reaction and how all that went down. Yeah, I think one of my favourites was this. I'll just give you a sec to read that. I like that one. It's a goodie, eh? That's a classic, that one. So anyway, we'll actually get back to that, because to be fair, I think I do know what he was getting at there, but let's start from the top here. So NASA should not be talking about going to the moon. We did that 50 years ago. Well, first of all, I bet he doesn't know that that's exactly what President Obama said. I think he would be spewing if he realised that he'd basically parroted the Obama view of all of this. But they should not be talking about going to the moon. Well, you know what, President Trump? They weren't until you told them to. What? You know, they had this plan. You said we need to go back to the moon. You told them specifically that we need to be going back to the moon and talking it up. So, oh, goodness me. Anyway, they did that 50 years ago. They should be focusing on the much bigger things we are doing, including Mars, of which the moon is part. Well, I think that the nicest thing you could say about that is that it's confusing. And I tell you what, in my work, I have dealt with many people who have some very confused ideas about how space works. I don't think I've met many people who are that confused. It's really something else. But to be fair, I think what's actually going on here is he's talking about the plan to get back to the moon, the whole program, to get back to Mars, the program to get back to Mars, and getting to the moon is part of that program. Still doesn't say why we shouldn't be talking about it. Let's be clear, it still doesn't make any sense, no matter which way you read this. The whole thing is really kind of bizarre, really. Is he even aware of what his own policy is? It doesn't really look like it. And from what I've seen of President Trump talking about space, he does seem to be genuinely confused about what space is. And I mean that. Some of the things he said have been really quite bizarre and shows someone who really has no concept of the universe or where anything fits in. What else? Defense and science. So he's saying NASA should be concentrating on defense and science. Well, NASA doesn't concentrate on defense. They don't work on defense. They provide launch services for the Department of Defense, sure, but it's not part of what they are supposed to be doing other than providing launch services. Science. There is one word in that whole tweet that I agree with. Yes, NASA should be concentrating on science. So, yep, I'll give you that one, President Trump. Now, why would he have said this? What's all of this about? Well, Matthew Gertz, I'll just go back one over here. Matthew Gertz, I think, nailed it here on the bottom left there. So what happened was that on Fox Business at 12:26 p.m., one of the hosts said, or made this comment about why are we focusing on the moon? Didn't we do that decades ago? That was 12:26. At 1:38 p.m., President Trump posted his tweet. And that seems to be pretty much his MO, doesn't it? He watches Fox News, someone says something on there, and he goes and parrots it on Twitter. So that's where it obviously came from, and I don't really think he understood much of what's going on here. NASA's response, well, yeah, it's pretty hard, isn't it? When you're the administrator of NASA and something like that comes out, how do you respond? Well, this is what Jim Bridenstine said on Twitter. He said, as POTUS said, NASA is using the moon to send humans to Mars. Curiosity and Insight are on Mars and will soon be joined by Mars 2020. So, good save, Jim, I think. Good on you. Yeah. I think he's just saying, well, look, let's not argue the point or anything. We can make it sort of like the president knows what he's talking about, and this was the plan all along. And look, let's be honest about it. I think Jim Bridenstine probably knows that by that evening, President Trump would have forgotten all about it and would have found something else to complain about. So he just needed to do something, say something to keep things moving along, and just hopefully it all blows away. So anyway, I don't see anything changing. I mean, even though the president, who does get to direct NASA's direction, he gets to tell them essentially what to do. It's a little more complicated than that, but that really is the guts of it. I don't think anyone's going to change anything because of that tweet, and I don't think he will mention it again, most likely. So anyway, that's enough of that. Goodness me. Anyway, let's stay with NASA and let's talk about the International Space Station. Because there was quite a big announcement, actually, from the International Space Station. NASA opens International Space Station to commercial opportunities and private astronauts. Wow, so this is a real turnaround for NASA. So let's see, what can we talk about here? First of all, it is an international space station, so it's not just NASA in charge of the space station. You've got the Russians, of course, and there's about 15 countries altogether involved in this. So it's not new to have commercial operations up there. Obviously, we've had SpaceX and others with commercial missions to the space station. There are commercial operations inside the space station, or some nanoracks and things like that inside there. The Russians have had at least one commercial paying passenger up on the space station. Someone tell me, have they had more than one? They've had at least one anyway. Now, my understanding of that, which happened quite a while ago, was that NASA wasn't really that comfortable with the whole thing of sending private space tourists to the space station, but they kind of lived with it, but then it sort of stopped, and I think NASA may have had a little bit of input there. But anyway, now they've turned around and said we want to open it up not just to astronauts or private astronauts going up there, but a whole range of commercial opportunities. So if you're interested in this, if you want to put in a business proposal, NASA's just opened the whole thing up. Go to their website. I've got a couple of links on the show notes, and there's a whole lot of links on here that tells you all about it. So it's really quite fascinating. It's not just that they're inviting astronauts up there. They're saying that we want to build a commercial infrastructure around this the space station, which is completely different to their approach in the past. So that will be really interesting to see where that goes in the years ahead. Now, one of the links in the show notes is to an hour-long video if you really want all the nitty-gritty. So it was a press conference. It was quite a long one. Yeah, unless you're really interested in it, it's probably not worth watching the whole thing. But they did talk about all the sort of things that they're trying to do here. They did mention a couple of things, such as they are looking towards possibly leaving the space station in orbit when NASA and the Russians don't want it anymore, and possibly passing it over to private industry. So this has been talked about in the space community for years. What's going to happen when the space station gets to the end of its life? Currently, it is funded up until 2024, and there are contracts in place so that it will definitely keep going till then, barring any disaster. There's a possibility of extending it to 2028. After that, no one actually really expects NASA or the Russians to want to keep it going, to be honest. So they're all looking at other things that I think they're starting to get ready to move on. So the question is, what's going to happen to it? And one of the common hopes is that it will get passed over to private industry. There are a few issues with that. The space station will be getting pretty old by then, a lot of old technology, and there's a real question of whether you're actually better off just starting with a new one rather than trying to keep that one going. But I think it's really interesting that NASA is now actually openly talking about getting more companies on board, putting in business proposals for the way that you can make money out of the space station. We're on board with that. We want to help you with it. Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see where that goes. A couple of other notes about that. They did say that the income from this is going to help defray some of the costs of the Artemis program going to the moon. So they're looking at ways to fund that. That's cool because Artemis is going to have a funding issue. So yeah, this would be one way to help that. No doubt you're wondering how much it's going to cost you. You can't actually book your tickets yet, but hopefully you will soon. And it looks like it's going to be starting at the bargain price of $35,000 per day. So, and there will be a minimum stay, of course. I'm not quite sure how long the minimum stay will be, but they are certainly talking millions of dollars per visit. You won't be allowed to go on a spacewalk. That's a bit of a shame. So it will all be inside the space station when you get up there. Going out on an EVA or spacewalk is a big deal. It's a big drama, and it would simply be too dangerous, I would imagine, and requires an awful lot of training. So I don't see NASA being involved in private people doing spacewalks at any time, really. They do have a list of permitted activities. So what they're hoping to do is get private companies, and this can only be US-based companies, by the way. So US-based companies can set up all of these operations on the space station. They can get astronauts, but the astronauts or the paying tourists can be from anywhere in the world. So this is your chance, Kiwis. Start putting your money together. Or do a crowdfunding thing for some of the flat earthers. That suggestion keeps coming up all the time. We should send some flat earthers up there. I say don't bother. Yeah, they won't buy it anyway. Yeah, so save up your money and see if you can, maybe you could do a give a little and get yourself some funds to get up there. So now, one other thing is it wasn't mentioned, and I don't know what any of NASA's partners in the space station think about any of this. I assume they must have consulted with all their partners, the Russians and the Europeans, Canadians, Japanese, etc. And so I assume that the other countries are okay with all of this. But interestingly, we didn't hear anything about it in the press conference. So that's what's going on over there on the space station. I think there's some really interesting times ahead, and I really look forward to seeing if some of these commercial companies can make a go of it. Right, we need to keep moving on here. Before we do that, let's have a couple of quick things. One thing we should do is just a quick reminder of our competition tonight. What is your favourite astronomical body or celestial object? You write the word comp, : space, and then whatever your answer is. You can say why it's your favourite. You don't have to, but it's nice if you do. It makes it more fun and interesting to go through and read it. Now remember, we are all about following instructions. Remember last week we talked about what it takes to be an astronaut, and I emphasised that you have to be able to follow instructions. This week we're going to be strict. If you don't write comp, : space, and then your answer, you're not in the competition. There you go. So we're going to be hard-nosed on that one. Righto. So what else do we need to talk about? Let's see, let's go and have am I up to this one? I think so. Couple of other things here. The InSight lander, the Mars lander. So we've covered that a few times on the show. So if you recall, it's all going pretty well with the InSight lander on Mars, except for one thing. What they call the mole, the thing that's supposed to be banging down into the ground to measure the heat and stuff under the ground, has got stuck. And they haven't yet been able to find a solution, but they are working on one. So if you want to find out what's going on there, go to the link in the show notes. There's a video there, which, as you know, we can't show you, but that explains what's going on. And there's a whole bunch of really interesting images here. So those are some actual images. So what's going to happen is the bit that's on the ground on Mars, that bit down the bottom there, that's the bit with the bit in it that's supposed to be digging into the ground. What they're going to do is the support structure on top of it, this grappling arm here, is actually going to go and try and lift it off so they can see what's going on underneath it. This is a really good example of robots versus people. If this was if there were people on Mars, they'd be able to literally go and lift it up and have a look. When you're doing it remotely like this, it takes months to do something like that. You've got to plan it all out. You've got to test it. You've got to do all these dry runs here on Earth and test it all here, because if something goes wrong and it falls over and your grappling arm can't quite reach it, or something else goes wrong, it's game over. So it's so much more difficult dealing with these sort of situations with robots. But we'll be keeping an eye on that and wish them all the best. There's a diagram of what they think has happened. So the mole, they think, is kind of off on a bit of an angle and it's not really quite working properly, but they don't know for sure. So there you go. That's what's happening with the InSight mission. And we wish them all the best trying to sort that out. Still with Mars, the Mars 2020 rover, which is due to launch next year in 2020. Now, this is still live, isn't it? I've just left this going live. I have. There's a really cool webcam. Link in the show notes. You can go and you can actually see them working on it. Let's just full screen that one. I think I should get away with showing you this one. But the bottom left there, that is the rover craft that they're all putting together. So you can actually go in here and watch them working on it live. Now there's no one in there now, but I came in and had a look just a couple of hours ago, and you could actually see the engineers in there working on it. And it's really neat to actually just see them doing their work there. And there's a whole explanation here about how it all works. This is the various parts of it. So the top there is the cruise stage that gets it from Earth orbit to Mars, the aeroshell, the descent stage here that lowers it down, the actual rover itself, and the heat shield here. So those are all the main components that are all being put together now, and you can watch the scientists or the engineers putting all that together. So there you go. I should pause that really. So that's the live Mars 2020 webcam. Right, heading out slightly further into the solar system, the Japanese Hayabusa 2 mission it's orbiting an asteroid at the moment, and this was just a really cool photo, I thought. Can I full screen that? Maybe not. Yeah, I can do that much. Anyway, so that's a really awesome close-up photo coming in. It was less than 10 meters above the surface of the asteroid, I believe. So they're looking for a landing site, and what you're seeing there, that's actually going to get in my way, but right down about there you can kind of see that little black dot. That is, in fact, I'll just do it on here. I'll do a squiggly thing. That black dot there is the site that they're going for a sample mission. So they're hoping to go down there and grab a sample of the asteroid from there and bring it back to Earth. So that's pretty cool. Awesome photo. Obviously you can see the shadow there of the spacecraft itself as it's orbiting that asteroid. So there's some cool stuff going on with asteroids at the moment. Hey, that's awesome. Right. Might just whiz through a few of these a little bit more quickly, actually. So the European Space Agency. Now, there's a couple of things going on with the Europeans. We don't talk about them so much. They tend to be not as flashy, but they are definitely not even the quiet, but the real solid achievers in space. They've got a good program going. They are currently developing a new launch vehicle called the Ariane 6 to replace the Ariane 5, but it has taken a bit of flack, because it's not exactly the most forward-thinking new kind of launch vehicle, to be honest. And the big thing is it's not reusable. And to be developing a new rocket that's not reusable at the moment is kind of, let's be honest, it's not really forward thinking, is it? It's not very innovative, and they have taken some flack for that. So, but anyway, that rocket is starting to get closer. They're just talking about the development being on track. But I've got a couple of other links in the show notes that are quite interesting. The Europeans are talking about their future plans, and they're making quite a big thing of reusability. And so if you're interested in what the Europeans are up to, go and check out those links, because they're laying out their longer term plan for the next 10 or 20 years or so. So yeah, a bit of stuff going on there. Other countries, Canada. is getting closer to building their first commercial spaceport. So they've just got the equivalent of resource consent there. So go and check out the link if you're interested to see what the Canadians are up to. So there's a lot of these commercial operations going on now. It's really starting to become, you can hardly keep up with all the new companies that are getting on board and getting into the commercial space thing. Let's just, I've got to keep remembering to get back to the chat. Now, while I think about this, I have a plan, I have a cunning plan to try and get keep a better handle on the chats here, but it's not for this week, hopefully later. The first thing I've got to do is try and figure out where I was up to before. Right, where were we? We need a Space Force. Michael, you reckon we need a New Zealand Space Force? That would be quite a hard case, wouldn't it? Cat's Eye Nebula. We were talking about that with the school. Was it just today? Yesterday we were talking about the Cat's Eye Nebula. That's a good one, thank you. Michael, yes, you're right. He means the moon is a stepping stone to Mars. Yeah. A couple of other comments about Trump there. Picking out inconsistencies in Trumpies is a never-ending exercise. Yeah, it's fun, isn't it? That is exactly what he was saying. Clumsily, that's right. He just didn't really word it well at all. And interestingly, of course, all the reaction for anyone who didn't really know about this, it was all the same. What is he talking about? Does he really think the moon is part of Mars? And if you didn't know, well, obviously that's what most people, from my point of view, that's what they seem to be interpreting it as. So anyway, that's enough of that. Right, okay, yeah, another couple of comments there about the same sort of thing. Oh, thank you, Ange. 7 tourists have been to the space station, was that? I didn't think there'd been that many. Okay. That could possibly be 7 altogether, but anyway, thank you for that one. Oh, Michael, you heard the minimum stay is 3 months for the upcoming flights. Yeah, that would be about right then, I would imagine. John, thank you again every week, and you catch me out every week. Thank you. You know what? Last week when you caught me out, I had my prize sitting in front of my monitor, so I wouldn't forget to tell you what the competition prize was. It sat there for the whole show while I looked around it and forgot to tell you. Tonight, for the competition, what we're going to do is a choice, actually. So you get to choose one of these books. We've got 2 books here. You can either choose this one, Eye on the Sky, The Fascination of Telescopes. So this is sort of very much an adult kind of book. It's there's lots of information and charts, and it's a really cool book, actually, about telescopes, if you're into that. Or if you prefer a bit of lighter reading, you can opt for this book, Captain Underpants and the Invasion of the Incredibly Naughty Cafeteria Ladies from Outer Space. So either one of those. So if you win the competition, just when you drop us a message to tell us how to post it to you, say which one of those you want. You can just say the telescope book or the kids book if you like. Right, where were we with the chats? We were almost there, I think. Thanks for that. Here's a question. How high is the radioactive radiation on Mars? Will it cause issues in scouting the desert sandstorm planet? Right, that's a good one. Let's talk about that, Ross, actually. We'll finish off here, though. And I'll just have a quick look at these other ones. Right, so we've got a few suggestions for things to talk about. Oh, no, sorry, those are the competition entries. Nick, you're keen for a spacewalk? So would I be. Wouldn't it be a bummer going all the way to the space station and it's just through that airlock? That's all it is. And you wonder if you'd be leaning on the astronauts. Yeah, no one will notice. Just suit me up. Let's just get out there. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen. It's a big drama getting outside. It takes hours, and there's no way you could do it surreptitiously. So anyway, right. So the good competition's there. Now look, let's just quickly answer that question from Ross. How high is the radiation on Mars? And the reason I'm thinking that is because someone else, Rob had sent us a link talking about. Just bear with me a moment. Actually, I'll take us to that page. If we have a look at it here. So this is, so this is from the European Space Agency. To be honest, I haven't had a good look through this yet, but it was an article talking about the radiation showstopper for Mars exploration. So the link for that is in the show notes. It's down under the questions part, and it was the question from Rob. So this is a really interesting one. There's some good information in this thing if you want to go through it. But look, here's my interpretation of the whole situation. So radiation on Mars is a serious problem. It really is. It's one of the, if not the most serious problem. Getting there, being on Mars and coming home, you're going to be exposed to radiation the whole time. So it's nasty. One of the things that we are working on at the moment is trying to figure out how bad it is. How much radiation is there actually on the surface of Mars and how badly will it affect you? but the consensus is it's bad enough that any kind of habitat on Mars will need a lot of radiation shielding. And here's the big kicker. That I think the one thing that people don't really understand about going to live on Mars is that if you go outside with your spacesuit on, that's not really giving you any significant protection against the radiation. So I've seen estimates that if you want to live for more than a few years, you really don't want to be spending more than a few hours per week outside on Mars. And that changes it a lot, I think. If you're thinking about going and living on Mars, it'd be one thing to know that you have to wear a spacesuit when you go outside. It'd be another thing altogether to know you can only be outside for a few hours a week. So I think it really is quite a serious problem. How serious, we just don't know, and I think there will be ways around it. I mean, there are possible solutions of localized magnetic fields to try and protect you a bit better and things like that. People have got ideas to deal with it. So will it cause issues in scouting, the desert sandstorm planet? Not so much with the robotic spacecraft, but certainly with people. Yep, it's definitely quite a serious issue, the radiation on Mars. Okay, so I think we've covered that. Where were we with our news? Okay, let's just carry on with this one, I think. If you are familiar with this beast or this idea, it's called the EM drive. We won't go into it now, but this is just for those of you who have been following this. That thing that you're looking at there is a kind of propulsion system that's not a traditional rocket. It uses microwaves. I don't think there's actually a diagram of it on this page, is there? But if you're interested, go and look it up. But the thing with this one is that there's been some tests done on it, and it seems to show a way of producing thrust, so like a rocket that could move forward, but without propelling any propellant out the back, which is not really how rockets work, and it seems to break the laws of physics, and people have been arguing about it for quite a long time, whether it's actually possible or not, but it is supposedly getting an actual test that will rule it out or give us a positive result. My money is on it being an experimental error, which I'm certainly not alone in thinking that, but it is kind of weird. NASA has actually tested this and they had a good result out of it. It seemed to show some thrust when NASA tested it. Others have done some pretty convincing tests. However, the thrust is so absolutely tiny and so very difficult to measure that it could still be within the experimental error. And yeah, I'll go on record in saying that's what I think will probably happen, but boy would I love to be proven wrong on that one. Because that would be quite spectacular if they can figure out a way. That would be a whole new kind of propulsion, which would be really awesome. Link in the show notes. Oh, here's another one from a story we covered a few weeks ago. I don't know if you remember this one, but we talked about that or a group of galaxies that appeared to have no dark matter with them, and how paradoxically that would actually be a big thing, some evidence in favour of the existence of dark matter. It's in one of the previous shows. We won't go over it now, but except to say that it's now starting to look like maybe it was an error. They might have just got that one wrong. It might turn out that the galaxies were actually just much closer than they thought, which would mean that everything that we talked about was not a real thing. So anyway, if you want to check that out, link in the show notes. But it looks like that particular line of research may just die a quiet death. If it doesn't, if anything comes of it, we will certainly report on it. Okay, what else have we got here? I didn't even really look into this one, but I had a bunch of people send me messages about this. A cool gassy ring has been detected around our galaxy's gigantic black hole. So yeah, this is the supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy, and we are very interested in learning as much as we can about it. It's a big part of learning how galaxies form and how the universe has changed over time. Lots and lots of questions about how that whole thing works, and the fact that we've got this observation now, hopefully it will help a lot to understand the black hole at the center of our galaxy. While I look at this, it's I see the same old thing that kind of annoys me, but I can see why it happens. You've got the story here. This was from Gizmodo, but lots of others do the same thing. It's a standard thing with astronomy stories. You put a CGI image at the top of it, and you're lucky if you get the actual real image at all. And it is kind of frustrating because the whole point was that they had got an image of the stuff, but they put an artist's impression instead. At least in this story, if you scroll down, you do get to see the actual image, and I know it's not as nice, is it? But that's the actual thing that we're talking about, and a lot of stories don't even include that. They only include the artist's impression, not the actual one. Anyway, if you want to go and have a look at that, link in the show notes. The UFOs. We talked about this a little while ago. There's been quite a change in the United States Navy's policy on reporting UFOs. And they're actually encouraging their pilots to report UFOs, because it's turned out that they've realized that the pilots are very reluctant to report UFOs, and it's not just in the US Navy. I think it's pilots in general, really. So it's actually quite hard to gather useful data about how often these things are happening and investigate them if the pilots aren't even reporting them. So the New York Times has done this quite long article, if you want to go and read it, link in the show notes, talking just about the background of all of this thing. And I think it's interesting. I mean, UFOs aren't really my thing so much, but I would love to get to the bottom of it. Tell you what, it would make my life easier if I knew what they were. Because I get this all the time, as you can imagine, and when people ask me about what it is that these pilots are seeing and stuff, and I say, I don't know, people don't like that answer. And if they say, do you think it's aliens? And I think, or I say, I wouldn't rule it out, but I doubt it. I don't think it's aliens. I think it'll be something else. And that's when people get angry with me. They really, really don't like that answer at all. So, boy, I'd love to get to the bottom of this. Anyway, there's a whole lot more on that evolving story, I think, about the US Navy and their whole business with UFOs. I think I'm getting through just about all the things that I wanted to talk about here. Now, have I got the link? I think I'm missing one of my links here, actually. I am. I wanted to mention that, actually I should be able to bring it up here. New Zealand is considering launching its own satellite for defence purposes. Now, if you've been following the show, you would know that defence is not really my thing. I don't really like talking about it that much. I don't know a lot about it. Should we let the ad play? Why not? But anyway, well, let's just go down here and have a quick look. So this was NewsHub, wasn't it? A website on NewsHub, link in the show notes. So there's a fair bit of stuff in here. It's not really all about space. They're just talking about plans for aerial drones and aerial monitoring, things like that. And I can see some merit in some of the stuff they're talking about, monitoring what's happening in our oceans for things like overfishing and whatnot. But it is an issue with what New Zealand is doing in space in terms of military stuff. So it's been talked about quite a lot what Rocket Lab is doing. They've been launching some stuff for DARPA, which is the United States Military Research Organization. And I think it's a thing that we are going to have to start talking about. I've sort of been thinking about tackling this one. But for one thing, I don't actually know an awful lot about military stuff in space. As I say, it's just not really my thing. Maybe others who know more about it might like to contribute to this. But I think it's a thing that is going to be talked about. The Spin-Off has been running a series about this on their website. There's a guy who's been following it for quite a while. He's not very happy with what's happening with what Rocket Lab is doing for the United States military. And I think when New Zealanders start getting more wind of some of these potential military payloads, there's some discussions to have. It's more complicated than that. The government assures us that there is no actual weapons or anything like that. It's purely research that benefits us all. And so far, from what I understand, I would go along with that. But certainly, as I say, it's something that's going to need to be talked about. So I don't know if you guys out there in the audience have any thoughts on this. I know a couple of you are probably not going to be too happy about the whole idea of sending military stuff into space from New Zealand. And I think New Zealand is... that's something we need to know about. It's something that we will need to talk about. So I'm a big fan of Rocket Lab, love their work, but it's an issue to keep an eye on, that one there. Anyway, that is enough of that. So there's a couple of other things that we wanted to talk about here. I'm just about out of time, actually. Here is a trailer. Actually, let's have a quick look at this one. This is an upcoming series called For All Mankind. Can't play you the trailer because you know the deal with the copyright thing. But this looks like an interesting one, actually. I liked the trailer. It's a show based on the premise that the that the Russians beat the Americans to the moon, and as a result the space race never really finished, and the Americans kind of countered back, and what would happen after that. So that looks really interesting. That's the IMDb page there, and you can go and watch the trailer for that if you like. I'm looking forward to seeing that one. I'm not sure when it's coming or how we get to see it, but keep an eye out on for that one. Now, how's our time? It's 7:45 already. What we should do is have a quick look at what's happening in the night sky. So just bear with me while we go over to Stellarium. Now, Harry, are you with us tonight, Harry? You were, because I wanted to talk about that telescope thing too, didn't I? You've just downloaded Stellarium. Everyone else should do this. You can see the name of it up the top there, Stellarium. It's free software, and it tells you what is happening in the night sky. So I think we are looking at what is happening right now. So let's actually just go back a little bit. We're looking out towards the west there. If we go back to about 5:45 this evening, and you have a look over sort of towards the northwest, the sun's just set over there, of course. If we zoom in a bit, you'll see that Mercury and Mars are over there, setting in the west. Now, very difficult to see, certainly with all the weather at the moment, you're not going to see much, but you can kind of see them setting over there. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to move forward one day at a time, and you can see what's happening at the same time each day. So you can see they're actually moving closer and closer together, and on about the 18th and then the 19th, they're right next to each other. So I don't know if we're going to be able to see that, to be honest. I mean, even on a really good night, it's very close to the horizon. The sun's not long down, but it'd definitely be worth a look, going out there and seeing if you can spot them both together. Mercury will be the brighter of the two. So yeah, so that's definitely worth a look at. So that's sort of 18th and 19th. Now, if we go around, we head right round to the east. In fact, let's just go back to now, actually. So if we look out towards the east, east, southeast right now, you can see a couple of things out there. Jupiter up there and Saturn down there. So a couple of nice planets to be looking at. To find them, well, actually, to be honest, it's going to be really obvious. Jupiter, you just cannot miss it. It's the brightest thing over there. So I don't really need to tell you how to find that. And then just look down here to the less bright, but still should be reasonably obvious, Saturn down there. And if we kind of just sort of go forward a little bit, you can see as the night goes on, that's how they will be moving. We'll just go forward an hour at a time or so. So that's what's happening with those guys over there. But if we come back a little bit, and again, I'm going to go forward one day at a time. So where are we now? That's sort of about 8:20 or so. If we go forward one day at a time, you can see the moon coming back down. You see how that changes each night. It moves about that much each night until we get to about the 19th, where the moon and Saturn. So that's the same night. Same night as we saw Mars and Mercury over in the other direction. If you look out towards the south there, you will see Saturn and the moon very close to each other. Not quite as close as the others, but still definitely worth a look. So that's actually taking us to next week's show, actually. But I wanted to say this tonight so that you would get a chance to go out and have a look at it if you wanted to. And the stuff that was happening over in the west there, that actually finishes just before the show starts. So if we, where were we? There's Mercury and Mars over there, but you see that's 6:20, and if we keep going forward, I think you'll probably find that it's just right before we actually go to air on the show. There you go, they're setting about 5 minutes before we go live. So there you go, there's a couple of things to keep an eye on out in the sky in the coming week. Let's see, we've got about 12 minutes left to go. Is there anyone out in the audience that wanted to talk about anything or ask any questions? We do have something over there. What have we got? With Matariki and all of that. Okay, then, good question. Thank you. So you recall we have been sort of talking about that a little bit in previous weeks, but Matariki at the moment is a morning object. So you can see it throughout the year, most of the year, at different places and different times in the sky. Whoops, I keep doing that. But at the moment, you will need to be getting up in the morning. Now, it's still probably a little bit early, but let's go right forward. Where are we? We need to be looking out towards the east. So we're looking towards where the sun's going to come up. Where am I? Zoomed in. Oh, actually it was right there, wasn't it? So we're looking out towards the east there, where the sun is going to be coming up. And here we're looking at about 5:45 in the morning. So you can see Matariki is actually just over there. But let's see, I wonder if we just go go forward a little bit. So if we look at it about now, so that's about 6:15, and this is when we're starting to be able to see it a little bit more easily. And this is about the time that I would sort of recommend, because this is a lot easier. What you want to do is, if you have a look straight out towards the east, you will find what most people call the pot. That's the constellation of Orion. That's Orion's belt, those 3 stars along there. So that's pretty easy to find, the pot, and it's the kind of the right way up if you're thinking of it as a pot over there. From there, you go over to the left until you see this triangular group of stars. That's some of this, it's the Hyades in the constellation of Taurus over there. Then you keep going left until you see the little cluster of Matariki over there. So I reckon that's probably the easiest way to find it. Once you've found it a few times, once you've seen it, you will realize it's unique in our night sky, and it becomes much easier to find. So the thing about this group of stars is that none of the individual stars are that bright. So you're not looking for a big or bright group of stars. Part of my frustration with this whole thing in New Zealand is that it keeps being shown kind of like this, as if that's what you're going to see in the night sky. And I've seen it in computer-generated images showing people Matariki in the night sky on news stories where it's just hideously wrong. It's way too big and doesn't look anything like it. They've taken a photo off the internet, obviously, and superimposed it over a horizon and said, there it is, that's what it looks like. But it doesn't. It's small. It looks much kind of more like that, really. You're looking for a very small group of stars, none of them that bright. But the thing is that it's a group of stars all together, all in this little wee spot. That's what you're looking for. And you have a look around the rest of the night sky, and there'll be nothing else like it. And that's kind of how you know you're looking at the right thing. But there you go. So hopefully that answers the question. Are you happy to give that a go? Have you guys been out there in the morning and had a look at Matariki? Who's given that a go? Anyone? One of you? Okay. It's pretty tough, isn't it? To be honest, when's the last time we did it? I think it's probably at least a couple of years ago. It's not that easy, to be honest. We get foggy mornings here in the Waikato, so that doesn't help. If you've got street lights around, it's near the horizon, that doesn't help. So it's not the easiest thing to do. But honestly, it really is worth a go, I think. It's seeing it with your own eyes and kind of getting that historical feeling, and imagine what it was like for people, when it was a big deal, a big part of their calendar, a big part of their life. Yeah, it's a thing that I reckon everyone in New Zealand should get out and do. Everyone in New Zealand should be able to recognise the Southern Cross on any night of the year, and they should be able to find Matariki. No excuses, people. You should be able to do those things. Okay, so righto. So that was a bit of a look at what's happening in the night sky. Let's go back and have a look at our chat and see what's going on here. So, all right, let's just go with our YouTube chat and see where we're up to. So, right, so I think we're up to about here. How has the Mars rover lasted 14 years when it was only meant to last 90 days? Thank you for that one, Black Diamond. So the rover that you were talking about is actually dead now, but the Opportunity and Spirit were 2 rovers that landed on Mars. The key thing with those rovers is that they were solar powered. So basically, they would just last as long as all their equipment lasted. We've just lost our Facebook chat, haven't we? Oh, that's a bummer. I wonder what happened there. It's still working over there, Jess? Okay, thanks for that. I wonder if it'll come back again. Yeah, okay, we'll just see what happens there. Anyway, we were right, so those particular rovers, they could just last until something failed. The first one, Spirit, that one died when it got stuck, unfortunately, in some soft sand. And then there was an equipment failure that killed Opportunity in the end. But so yeah, that's how they lasted so long, because they were solar powered. Other ones that use different types of power, they will have a finite lifespan. So Curiosity, the Mars 2020 rover, they can still last quite a long time, but eventually their fuel will run out. They are powered by a kind of nuclear power. It's not what you normally think of as nuclear power. So radioisotope thermoelectric generators is what they use, but they do still have a limited lifespan, so they can't last forever. Right, Michael says the EM drive would be game-changing if they can get it to work. It absolutely would be. It would be a total game-changer, and I hope it does come to something. Unfortunately, I'm not that optimistic. Righto, so Jazzaconda was a pilot. You've seen 3 UFOs, never reported any of the sightings. There you go. Thank you for that. Yeah, it would be nice if people felt more comfortable. Peace for Space, I like you. Black Diamond, I like your thoughts there. I think so too. I'm not a fan of militarising space at all. Right, were they just lights that you could not recognise or actual objects? All right, you were asking a question of Jazzaconda. 2 sightings were light just on dusk. The third one's in broad daylight. Okay then. That's interesting. The third remains the craziest thing I've seen. I was on the ground. The object was following another aircraft working from the same airstrip. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stories, about UFOs. And although I'm highly sceptical about them actually being aliens, they are interesting stories. And I'd really like to know what was going on. Pleiades is easy one to find and is welcome sight from here in Kaikohe. So thanks, Ross, for that. Good on you. Now, hang on. Right. Oh, this is interesting. So we've linked back up with the Facebook comments. It looks like it's dropped out, but it's only just started again, so we've missed out all the other comments there. So sorry, guys. I will go back and try and have a look at the comments, which reminds me I have been trying my best to go back over the comments after the show. Haven't been very good at it, have I? It's a bit like my emails, a bit hopeless really. But I will try and go back over those Facebook comments and try and catch up a little bit there. Thank you very much to everyone who is commenting. Right, we've got a few minutes left. We can probably talk about a couple of other things. So from last week, Alan Little said, a friend has a radio program LP of the Apollo mission to the moon. Is there anyone who could be interested? Alan, did you mean, should we play it on the show? Do you want someone to buy it? Sorry, I'm not 100% sure what you meant by that. But anyway, Alan has put that out there if anyone is interested in an LP of the Apollo mission. I've actually got one of them out the back here, a couple of those records of the audio from the moon mission. Fletcher asked about what causes the weather and storm and lightning and rain and heat. Look, to be honest, Fletcher, I'm not a meteorologist and I'm kind of going to just dodge that one. Sorry about that. We may get back to it, but it's not really my area. So I'm just going to kind of avoid that one for now. Sorry about that. Now, Harry asked, what makes a cheap telescope different from an expensive one with similar specs? So in other words, if they've got the same aperture, focal length or whatever, what separates a cheap one from an expensive one? So yeah, let's talk about that for a minute. It's an interesting question. So the quality of optics, manufacturing, etc. Yes, all of those things. Generally speaking these days, unless you're talking about the really cheap and nasty telescopes, the optics is kind of, for most people, is sort of more or less good enough. You know, there's not a lot of variation in the quality of the optics, and especially these days, most of the optics for good telescopes, actually it all comes out of the same few places in China. All the different brands are just using the same optics really, so the mirrors, the lenses, that's the sort of thing I'm talking about. So I tend to think, in my experience, that the thing that stands out to me between the cheap and the expensive ones is often the mount and the controls and that kind of stuff. So the optics themselves, if you can line it up and get it on the object, it's a similar sort of view, but trying to line it up and getting the fine controls is a lot more tricky. So for example, a really common thing with the cheaper telescopes is you get it all nicely lined it up, just adjusting it around there, then you take your hands away and it drops and you can't see anything anymore. That's a common thing with the cheap ones. And then when you're trying to move it, it might kind of jerk a little bit, or it's just not great. And with telescopes, astronomical telescopes, that is a big deal. It makes it really hard and it's frustrating. And that's one of the big reasons I think people go off their telescopes, because that part of it is so hard. With the more expensive telescopes, in fact, those telescopes over the back there, I'm a really big fan of those Dobsonians, those big white ones over there. They've got a few of them there. That's another one over there. That's a different kind of telescope. But those big white ones there, those ones, when you get it lined up on something, it's just solid. It just stays there. You take your hand away, and then unless someone bumps it, it won't move. And then it's much easier to move by yourself. You just give it a little poke and you're good as gold. So that's kind of like a mid solution. Those ones over there range between $500 and $1,500 plus any eyepieces you might want with them. So for a big telescope like that, they're a good deal. That's what I recommend for most people. If you're in any way serious, get yourself a Dobsonian telescope. 8-inch Dobsonian is a really good one. And you should buy it from us, of course. You can buy them online, but I don't want you to. I want you to buy them from us. Or you can buy it online from us too, by the way. Just get hold of us and we'll tell you how to do that. Or you can go the whole hog and buy the really expensive one for thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, and that gives you the go-to controls. So once you set it up, you've got a little programmable thing, and you just tell it where you want it to point, it will find it, and it will track it so you don't have to move it at all. And so those are the best ones of all. But by jingos, you're paying a lot of money for them. It's anywhere from 5 to 10 times the price for that functionality versus those ones over there that are very manual. So those Dobsonians, you have to line them up yourself. You kind of look through the finder scope. You might use a laser pointer or something. So you have to line it up, and you have to keep moving it every minute or so to keep something in view. And that's hopeless for most photography. So if you're happy to live with those things, that you've got to line it up manually, which isn't that hard, it's just a bit of practice, and as long as you don't want to do any of that really long exposure photography, those things are just a fraction of the cost, so heaps and heaps cheaper. So hope that answered your question. What is the difference? And I think the main difference between the cheap ones and the expensive ones, assuming their specs are about the same, it's in the mount and the controls and just the general quality and stuff. Now I know that there's a lot of amateur astronomers out there and possibly some professionals watching this show, so let me know if I've missed anything there or you want to add anything to that.
Can I add something about telescopes?
You can add something about telescopes. What would you like to add?
There was something on Fairgo last night about some guy in Timaru selling telescopes and ripping people off, so be really careful and talk to Dave.
Thank you for that. Now, that's interesting. Do you know if it was telescopes.net.nz? Does that ring any bells? It might be. Look, let's actually just give me a quick sec here, guys. I know it's we're just about at the end of our time here, but I'm pretty sure this was on telescopes.net.nz. So they've been on Fairgo before, yes. And I think. Actually, now I'm suddenly not so sure now, actually. No, look, maybe don't go by what I just said. Sorry about that. I don't want to point the finger at the wrong people.
No. How about
okay.
detail for next week?
Yeah, look, don't let me forget. We'll get that sorted for next week because there is a telescope dealer that is not delivering. So, and I thought it was this one. Now I'm not sure. But tell you what, don't buy a telescope before next week, but it doesn't matter, of course, because you're going to buy it from us anyway. So doesn't matter. Okay, so anyway, that's all about telescopes and binoculars too, by the way. We'll talk about that another time because I'm a big fan of using binoculars for astronomy. Seriously, I think it's a really, really good option. Righto, was there anything else that we needed to talk about tonight? Did anyone else have anything else in the audience? Jess, was there anything over there that we needed to talk about? Okay, with that we are actually up to competition time. How are we going with the competition? Have we got everything all collated over there? So you got everything in the astronaut helmet, have you? Okay, what we need is someone in the audience to dip into the astronaut helmet and pull out a prize winner. Now, as you know, we've been having...
Don't jinx it.
Don't jinx it. Okay, thank you for that. We won't jinx it, and we'll see what happens. Okay, who wants to? Okay, Nat, you want to pull a name out of the space helmet, and we'll see who we've got tonight. So remember, whoever wins the prize, you need to private message me somehow with your postal address and tell me whether you want the telescope book or the kids book. Okay, and the winner tonight is Esther Hildebrand. So yeah, congratulations, Esther. Well done. You let me know which of those prizes you want, and we will get that in the post as soon as possible. Now, Esther has been a supporter of the Space Centre before, and you might remember she came in. Well, it wasn't her, but her family donated a whole bunch of stuff a little while ago, a whole bunch of really cool things, and we really do appreciate that. So I'm glad that the prize is going there. And it didn't go to anyone in our studio audience. And it didn't go to any family members or relatives or anything at all. So there's no scandals tonight. We're all in the clear. Okay. Sorry, Jess, go ahead.
It was NZ Telescopes, Robert McTarg.
Okay, it was okay. Thank you for that, Jess. Look, let's just do that now. Who told us that, Jess? By the way,
Esther.
Oh, it was Esther who told us that. Thank you, Esther, for that. So, look, while we're here, let's just tidy this up. What was it? It was NZ Telescopes.
No, and then the name was Robert.
Oh, okay. And the name was Robert someone. So they're still saying the same website. Okay, and the name was Robert someone. So we're going to keep an eye out for that. Look, I will just double check that. Hang on, I wonder if we've got the about thing here. No, about up here. Okay, look, I am going to just double and triple check that one to make sure I'm giving you the right information. So anyway, just be careful with the telescope situation. So I think with that, unless there was anything else, let's just have one last quick look at the chat. Sorry about what happened to the Facebook thing there. Look, honestly, none of the stuff works as well on Facebook from our end as it does on YouTube. Oh, there we go, it is, right. We've got your comment. NZ Telescopes, Robert McTague, is that how you pronounce that? And Ange, you've got it as well. He's facing obtaining by deception and drugs charges. Oh, the plot thickens after police followed up. Fair goes investigations. Okay, thank you, Ange, for that. So there we go. There's all the official information there. So, sorry, and Jacob, what is we talked about that, didn't I? What is a good telescope I would recommend? By and large, you cannot go wrong with an 8-inch Dobsonian, but please do feel free to just ask me if you've got a telescope in mind. I'm happy to chat about it. Anyway, I think that's enough of that. So thank you very much for our studio audience for making the effort to come along tonight again. Really appreciate it, you guys. Thank you, Jess, for your help tonight. Lovely having you along here. And that is all from me tonight. So we will see you again, hopefully, same time next week. Bye-bye.